There are places in Asia where the past never rests, where echoes live longer than the ones who made them, and where some rooms were never meant to be reopened. Welcome to Ghosts of Asia, where haunted traditions, urban nightmares, and spiritual wounds blur the line between this world and the next. Tonight's story is not just folklore, it's not just rumor. It's a digital curse hidden inside a modern city, disguised as a glitch, dismissed as a dream, until it's too late. This is the tale of Room 309, a room that was never supposed to be booked. A man checked in, but what came out was not the same, and what followed never left. If you've ever felt watched in an empty room, if your reflection ever blinked wrong, you may already be part of her story. Let the haunting begin. The rain hadn't stopped since morning. It wasn't a storm, just that steady, cold drizzle that made the sky feel like wet paper. Jun-hyuk stood under the awning of a nondescript business hotel tucked between two convenience stores in a narrow alley of Gangnam. He was soaked from the knees down, one suitcase wheel broken, his phone at 6%, and his patience completely gone. He pushed the glass door open. A dull chime rang above. The lobby was small, too clean, too quiet. Artificial orchids in dusty vases. A flickering TV mounted to the corner wall played muted news. The woman at the front desk barely looked up, her uniform creased, her lipstick too red for the lighting. "I have a reservation," Jun-hyuk mumbled, placing his ID on the counter. She took it without a word, typing with long, chipped nails. Click, click, pause. She glanced at the screen, her brows knit slightly, so brief he almost didn't notice. Then she looked up, her voice too polite. "Ah, Mr. Choi, it seems—" Another pause. She didn't finish the sentence, just turned the monitor slightly away from him. "We only have room 309 left." He blinked, confused. "Wasn't I booked for 501? The receptionist smiled, thin, fragile. "There was an issue. Room 309 is available. No charge difference, of course." Jun-hyuk didn't argue. It was late. He was tired. This wasn't the Four Seasons. He took the key card. Floor 3. As the elevator doors closed, he caught one last glimpse of the receptionist, her eyes on him, unmoving, long after he'd turned away. The hallway smelled faintly of mold and something old, like sealed closets and forgotten raincoats. Room 309 was at the far end, just before a faded red fire escape door. Its number plaque hung slightly crooked. The moment he stepped in, he regretted it. Not because of anything obvious. The room was clean, neat. The lights worked, the sheets were white, but it felt wrong, like stepping into a photograph where everyone had just walked out of frame. The wardrobe stood in the corner, old, wooden, with mirrored doors. One door had a slight chip in the glass. He didn't look too long. He took a quick shower, brushed his teeth, and collapsed onto the bed with a sigh. His phone buzzed low, 3% battery. No energy to plug it in. Just one thing before sleep. He tapped the camera app and placed the phone against a stack of brochures on the desk, pointed toward the bed and wardrobe. A strange impulse, almost childlike. He told himself it was nothing, just proof, just in case the tapping sound came back. He turned off the light. The rain outside whispered against the window like a lullaby spoken through teeth. And in the dark, the wardrobe clicked once, very softly. Morning. He woke to light. The rain had stopped. A pale glow leaked through the curtains. His phone lay on the floor, battery dead. He had forgotten the charger. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, Jun-hyuk stumbled into the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. Something about last night stuck with him, like a dream with too much weight. He remembered the click, but nothing after. Downstairs, the lobby felt colder than before. The receptionist had changed, now a younger man with a name tag that read Yoon. Polite, cheerful. He offered a free breakfast token. "I'm in room 309, Junhyuk said casually. "Is there any chance to switch to a higher floor?" The receptionist froze, a slow, almost imperceptible blink. "Room 309. Yeah. Something wrong?" Another pause, then a tight smile. "1 moment, sir." He typed quickly. More silence. His fingers stopped. His eyes scanned the screen again, this time slower. I'm sorry, sir, but room 309 is not listed as booked. It's been sealed since 2020. Junhyuk laughed. "I stayed there last night, key card and everything." The receptionist shook his head. "That's not possible." Junhyuk leaned in. "Check the CCTV if you want." We can check the system again," Yoon said, clearly unsettled. "But 309 isn't available. It's been off our grid since—" He stopped himself, then offered a nervous bow. "Let me call the manager." 2 minutes later, security escorted him back upstairs. The hallway looked exactly the same, except for one thing. Room 309 had no keycard slot. Just an old metal knob sealed with a red sticker that read in faded Hangul, "Do not open. Closed for investigation." Inside, dust covered every surface. The bed was stripped. The wardrobe stood wide open, empty. No signs of anyone ever staying. No signs of him. Junhyuk's voice trembled. I was here. My suitcase, my shoes. The mirror had a crack." The manager looked at him cautiously. "There's no record of you checking in to this room, Mr. Choi. You were in room 212. Look." He showed the screen. Junhyuk stared. It was his name, his ID, room 212, a time-stamped login at 9:42 p.m. But that wasn't the room he stayed in. He knew what he saw. What he felt, that click inside the wardrobe. That night, back at a friend's apartment, Junhyuk plugged in his phone. The screen flickered once before charging, and then, without any prompt, a video began to play. Timestamp 3:09 a.m. In the static-filled darkness, the wardrobe door creaked open, pixel by pixel, and someone, began to crawl out, her face a blur, her hair dragging on the floor, and she stood over his bed for a long, long time, watching, waiting. The video ended with a single frame, her head tilted, her voice barely audible. "You were never supposed to be here." Rain returned that evening. Colder now, heavier. A dull, relentless rhythm on the windows of Junhyuk's friend's apartment. He sat curled on the couch, phone clutched in both hands, staring at the video for what must have been the 20th time. Each time, it played exactly the same. The wardrobe door in room 309 creaked open at 3:09 a.m. The dark shape crawled forward. Long black hair, bare knees, cracking joints. Her face remained a mess of digital static, as if reality refused to render her fully. She stood by his bed for 2 hours and 42 minutes, unmoving, watching. And when she finally turned her head toward the phone's camera, she didn't blink. She only whispered, "You were never supposed to be here." He paused the frame, zoomed in. No luck. The face was unreadable, like the pixels themselves were cursed. He barely slept that night. Every creak of the apartment seemed amplified, pipes tapping, floorboards sighing, wind rattling windows. But worst of all, the wardrobe in the corner of his friend's guest room. Just a normal IKEA closet, nothing like the old wood of 309. Still, he couldn't stop looking at it. At 3 a.m., he finally gave in. He set his phone down again, facing the wardrobe. Hit record. This time, he sat awake in the corner, watching it live with his own eyes. 301, 304, 307. Nothing. 309. The wardrobe didn't open, but something tapped. Once, then twice, from inside. The video from that night didn't show much. A shaky, anxious room, a ticking clock, the digital hum of silence. But then, frame by frame, at 3:09:14 a.m., the wardrobe's handle moved, just slightly, as if brushed by a breeze from within. He turned on the lights, threw the door open. Empty. Still, when he played back the recording again, something new had appeared. An audio spike, nearly inaudible. He raised the volume, isolated the moment. Faint static, then a breath, then something softer, buried beneath. Let me in. The next day, he visited the hotel again. The manager was different, older, polite, but guarded. When Junhook mentioned room 309, the man's expression didn't change, but his eyes drifted to the side, toward the hallway camera monitor. "We don't talk about that room," the manager said flatly. "I need to know what happened there," Junhook insisted. "I stayed there. I recorded." "No, you think you stayed there, but our logs say otherwise." The sentence had the practiced tone of someone who'd said it before, maybe too many times. "You're not the first," he added quietly. "What?" He folded his hands. "Others have claimed similar stories, waking up in that room, finding footage, hearing voices, but room 309 was sealed after a tragedy 3 years ago." "What kind of tragedy?" He hesitated. "She hung herself," he finally said, "inside the wardrobe." Silence. "No one checked in afterward," he continued. "We sealed the room. We even repainted the whole floor, but sometimes—" his voice caught slightly. "Sometimes people still see it in the booking system, as if it's offering itself." Junhook leaned forward. "Then why not delete it?" The manager shook his head, eyes distant. "We've tried." That night, Junhook didn't record. He didn't need to. At 3:09 a.m., the wardrobe in his friend's apartment opened by itself. Not fully, just enough. And on the inside of the door, scratched in something too dark to be dust, were 3 numbers. 309. The next morning, his phone buzzed. A new file. He never pressed record. Timestamp, 3:09 a.m. The same static, the same glitch. But this time, she was closer. Instead of standing across the room, she was kneeling beside the phone, face still pixelated, hands curled into the floorboards. And now, in the faint glow of screen light, he could see something new. Her mouth moved, not whispering, chewing. He paused the video, rewound, played it again. The noise, that awful wet clicking, wasn't static. It was her jaw, moving wrong, grinding. And just before the clip ended, her eyes turned toward the lens. Then, she smiled. He threw the phone across the room. For the first time, he felt it, the cold. Not the weather, something deeper, the kind that settles behind your eyes, something that didn't come from outside. That night, he didn't sleep, and in the silence, he heard her voice, not from the phone, not from the wardrobe, from inside his head. "You stayed in my room. Now I'll stay in yours." Jun-yuk didn't leave his friend's apartment for 2 days. He barely spoke, barely ate. The phone sat face down on the table, as if looking at it might let her out, as if the act of pressing play would make her more real. But it was already too late for that. The footage wasn't just on the device, it was in his mind. Every frame burned into his memory. That unnatural way her limbs moved, the sound of her mouth, the pixels that refused to form a face, as if even the camera was terrified to see her. And worst of all, the time code. Always the same. 03:09 a.m. He thought about deleting the files, but when he opened the gallery, they were gone. Not moved, not renamed, gone. No trace, no playback history, no cache. His hands trembled. A part of him wanted to believe it was over. Then, ding! A new file appeared. Untitled.mov. Timestamp. Created. Today, 03:09 a.m. This one was different. No sound, just static for the first minute. Then the wardrobe came into view. Not his friend's, not the hotel's, a different one. Plain, modern, white sliding doors. It took him a few seconds to recognize it. His childhood bedroom. His old wardrobe. The video zoomed slightly, though he had no memory of setting any motion. The camera focused on the mirrored surface, and in the reflection, she was standing behind him. Only it wasn't him in the reflection. It was the younger version of him, 10 years old, frozen, pale, and she was leaning in, mouth inches from his ear, pixelated, whispering. The video ended before he could hear the words. He dropped the phone. His breath came fast now, shallow and panicked. He tried to speak, but no words came. Only one thought. She's not just in the hotel. She's following him through time, through memory, through screens, through him. Desperate, Jun-yuk called a data recovery specialist, a friend of a friend, someone who owed him a favor. They met at a cafe downtown. Jun-yuk handed over the phone, half expecting it to burn through the table. "I just need to know how these videos are being created," he whispered. "They show things I didn't film." The specialist nodded slowly, intrigued. "I've seen weird stuff before. AI overlays, spliced frames, even ghost frames caused by overheating sensors. But this feels different." 3 hours later, the specialist called. I don't know what to tell you," he said. "There's no app, no editing software. The video metadata looks clean, but every single clip you showed me is stored in a partition that shouldn't exist on your phone." "What does that mean?" "It means they're not saved by you, not by any process I can trace. It's like the phone is generating them on its own." Jun-yuk cold. "And one more thing," the tech added. "The voice in the third clip, I ran it through a cleaner, slowed it down, enhanced it. It's in perfect Korean, but reversed. She says, 'You opened the door. Now you must keep it open.'" That night, Jun-yuk didn't record anything. He left the phone powered off, battery removed, locked in a drawer. He slept with the lights on, but sleep never came. At exactly 3:09 a.m., his bathroom light began to flicker. The air turned still, pressurized, like he was underwater. And from the mirror, he saw movement. Not in the room, in the reflection. Behind him, the wardrobe door was wide open, though he swore he'd never opened it. Something stepped out. He turned, fast. Nothing there. But when he looked back at the mirror, She was closer, just behind his shoulder, still faceless, still flickering, and she breathed against his neck. Not a sound, a sensation, ice. By morning, Jun-hyuk was different. There was something in his eyes, something hollow. The beginnings of sleep deprivation, yes, but also something more. Awareness. Not just of her, but of something deeper. He couldn't explain it, but it felt like gravity had shifted, like the world had grown thinner, more fragile, and she was moving through the cracks. She wasn't bound to room 309 anymore. She was never bound to a room at all. The room was just the invitation, the camera, the door. He was the vessel. He turned his phone back on. A single new file. But this one wasn't video. It was an image, a selfie, of him, except he never took it. In the background, over his shoulder, almost invisible, was a shape in the dark. Long hair, bent knees, a single hand pressed against the inside of the wardrobe door. That was the moment he realized the videos weren't warnings. They were progress reports, and each one brought her closer. The next morning, Jung-hyuk returned to the hotel, not out of courage, not curiosity, but because it was the only place that made sense anymore. The images, the videos, the voice, they all pointed back to room 309. If there was any way to end this, to understand what was happening to him, it was behind that door. Even if that meant walking straight into her arms. The lobby had changed. Same hotel, same desk, same elevator. But the atmosphere was off, emptier somehow, as if the air held less oxygen, as if something had been taken from the space, leaving behind a subtle void. No receptionist this time. Only a flickering screen behind the desk showing static from security cameras. The front desk bell was cracked. The vase of orchids had withered. No one came when he rang. So he walked. The elevator opened with a slow, painful groan. Its interior lights dimmed with each floor, flickering in a rhythmic pulse that matched the pounding in his chest. Third floor. The hallway was silent. He passed room 301, then 303, each one quiet, undisturbed. And there it was, room 309, exactly where it had been, exactly as he remembered it, and yet not. There was no dust on the doorknob now. The seal that once marked "Do Not Enter" had vanished. The crooked number clack had been repaired, sitting straight and polished. As if someone had recently cleaned it, as if someone had prepared it for him. He raised his hand to knock, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe respect, maybe desperation. But the door creaked open on its own. The room was pristine, perfectly made bed, crisp white sheets, a tray of untouched welcome tea on the desk. It looked like every other hotel room in Seoul, plain, neutral, forgettable. But the wardrobe still stood in the corner, just as tall, just as old, just as heavy with silence. And that was the only thing that hadn't changed. Jung-hyuk stepped inside. The air tasted different, metallic, stale, like wet coins left in the dark. He reached for his phone, turned the camera on. This time he spoke into the lens. "Today is August 17th. I'm in room 309. I'm not sure how I got here. I need proof." He panned across the room, the bed, the desk, the window, the wardrobe. Its mirrored surface flickered for a moment, just once, like a skipped frame. He opened it slowly. Empty. but the smell inside was stronger, like something had lived in there, or died. He sat down at the desk, opened his laptop, and searched again. Room 309, Hotel Ghost, Seoul. Sealed room hotel incident. Wardrobe suicide mystery. Most pages led nowhere. A few local blogs, urban legends, one Reddit thread, years old, archived. Anyone ever stayed at the Moonview Hotel and ended up in 309? My cousin was supposed to be in 505, ended up there instead. The next day, she couldn't remember anything, just kept drawing a girl with a static face. Thread closed due to inactivity. He scrolled further. A comment buried below caught his eye. They say if she chooses you, it means the room didn't let you in. You let her out. Suddenly, something shifted. A sound, soft, dragging across the floor, behind him. He turned, fast. The wardrobe door had moved. No wind, no window open, but it had opened just an inch. Enough to see that the inside was no longer empty. A set of dusty footprints, barefoot, led from inside the wardrobe across the floor. Not out, but back in, as if someone or something had returned to hide. He stood slowly, approached the wardrobe again, looked inside. Still nothing, still empty. But when he reached out to touch the back panel, his fingers met something cold and slightly wet. He recoiled, looked at his hand. Red. Not blood, but red ink, thick and glossy, smelling of rust and salt. And then he saw it. Words scrawled behind the coats that weren't his, written in a finger stroke. She lived here too long. Now she needs someone new. A sudden crash. He turned toward the mirror and saw himself. Only it wasn't quite him. His reflection was delayed, just by a second, and when he smiled nervously, the reflection did not. Instead, it raised one finger and pointed toward the bed. Jung-hyuk turned. There, lying neatly atop the blanket, was his suitcase, zipped, clean. He hadn't brought it, but it was his, the same broken wheel, the same worn leather tag with his initials. He opened it. Inside, neatly folded clothes, phone charger, toothbrush, a printed hotel receipt with his name and room number, 309. He staggered back. In the mirror, his reflection smiled and whispered, with her voice, "You're already home." Jung-hyuk ran, down the hallway, into the elevator, through the lobby, which was now completely empty. Not even the hum of the vending machine remained. The city outside was cold, distant, but real. He flagged down a taxi, sat in the back seat shaking. The driver looked at him through the rearview mirror. "I thought they closed that place," he said casually. Jung-hyuk looked up. "What? The Moonview, room 309, right?" Jung-hyuk froze. "How do you know that?" The driver didn't answer, just smiled. And in the mirror, for a brief, impossible moment, his face glitched. Pixels, static, her. When Jung-hyuk finally returned to his friend's apartment, he locked every door, closed every curtain, and then he looked at his phone. Battery, 93%. No apps running. But the gallery had a new file. Video 309 final.move. Timestamp 3:09 a.m. He hadn't recorded anything. Not that night. Not ever again. But the video showed him sleeping in that same hotel bed, room 309, the wardrobe wide open, and her walking toward the camera. This time, no glitches, No static, no blur. Her face was fully visible now, but he couldn't describe it. Not because it was monstrous, but because it looked exactly like his.
The file was still there in the morning. Video 309.final. Created 0309 AM. Location metadata. Moonview Hotel, room 309. But Jun-juk had never returned. He'd been sleeping on the couch at his friend's apartment, wrapped in a blanket, under fluorescent kitchen light, in full view of the locked front door. There was no way he'd been anywhere near that hotel, but the footage said otherwise. He pressed play. The screen opened on a slow, creeping shot of room 309. The camera was steady, as if placed purposefully. Sheets rumpled, light flickering overhead. The sound of breathing, low and uneven, not from the man in the bed, from behind the camera. And then, slowly, the wardrobe creaked open. A shape emerged. Hair matted to pale skin, limbs disjointed, jaw twitching slightly. She stood at the foot of the bed. Then she turned and walked toward the camera. Jun-juk paused it, backed away. The last frame of the video showed her face, not pixelated this time, not blurred, but not hers either. It was his. Mouth slightly open, eyes completely white, skin paper-thin and twitching, and written across the screen in jagged white text, "Second night, still watching you." Jun-juk threw the phone to the floor. It didn't break. Nothing ever did. He picked it up, hands shaking, and opened the gallery again. The file was gone. In its place was another. WatchMe.mov. No preview. He deleted it. It reappeared. He deleted it again. It came back with a new name. I'm here.mov. Then, don't run. Then finally, look behind you.mov. He didn't look. He couldn't. Instead, he locked himself in the bathroom, pulled the shower curtain closed, and curled into the farthest corner of the tub like a child. He tried to call his friend, but the call dropped before it could ring. Tried again. Nothing. No signal, no Wi-Fi, no exit. Even the silence felt alive, as though something in the air was listening, and outside the bathroom door, he heard it again, the sound that had followed him since room 309. Tapping. Not on the wall, not on the door. Inside the wardrobe. He knew what it meant now. She wasn't in one place. She was in every place that held forgotten corners, unused closets, dim mirrors. She had followed him through code, through memory, through recognition. She had no face of her own, so she borrowed his. By nightfall, he'd stopped checking the files, but the phone buzzed anyway. Buzzed like it had a heartbeat. When he finally looked, it wasn't a video this time. It was a live stream. Live, 3:09 a.m., room 309. He stared. How could there be a live stream of a place he hadn't returned to? And yet, the image was clear. The wardrobe slightly open, the sheets turned down, a body under the covers. He watched, unable to look away. Then, something moved behind the wardrobe door. The chat feed started to scroll even though no app was open. Guest 309, she's coming. Guest 309, she sees you. Guest 309, you're next. Guest 309, say goodnight. Then silence. And then, in the stream, she stepped out. Closer than ever before. He closed the phone, powered it off, removed the SIM card, and smashed it with a hammer. He felt relief for 1 second, until his friend walked in from work and said, "Hey, why were you live streaming yourself sleeping last night?" Jun-hyuk stared at him. I didn't." His friend lifted his phone and showed the notification. A link, archived, room 309 replay.mov. "What is this?" his friend asked. "Why is your face all blurry in it?" Jun-hyuk didn't answer. He already knew. That night, he packed a bag. No phone, no electronics, just clothes, toothbrush, and a single notebook. He booked a bus ticket to a mountain village 3 hours away, somewhere with no signal, no screens, no reflections. He sat at the back of the bus, next to a foggy window. The world passed slowly, drenched in gray. He didn't sleep. At 3:09 a.m., the man in the seat ahead of him turned around and, without blinking, whispered, "She's already on board." The next morning, he opened his backpack. Inside, atop his folded clothes, was a phone. His phone, intact, charged, and already playing a video. The phone was turned off. No SIM card, no battery installed. And yet, it played. Not a ringtone, not a notification. A video. Jun-hyuk stared at it, the screen glowing faintly in the early light of the mountain village. He hadn't brought the device. He'd smashed it, left it, buried it beneath concrete, and still, here it was. Timestamp, 3:09 a.m. Title, Just a Dream.movie. He didn't press play. The video played itself. The frame opened on the inside of a moving bus. His bus. The seats, the foggy windows, the faint hum of wheels rolling over wet asphalt. And there, in the final row, was him, slouched against the window, eyes closed, breathing slow. Across the aisle, a woman sat perfectly still, hands folded on her lap, her face turned toward him, unmoving, pixelated, obscured. And then she stood up. In the footage, her movements were jerky, flickering, like a corrupted file rendered in flesh. She approached sleeping Jun-hyuk, bent low, leaned in close, and whispered something directly into his ear. He slammed the phone shut, but the sound didn't stop. The whisper continued, only now it wasn't coming from the video. It was inside the room, behind him. His breath caught. Slowly, he turned toward the wardrobe. It stood in the corner of the small mountain inn, old, painted white, lined with a floral curtain, the kind every room in Korea seemed to have. He approached it slowly, reached for the handle, paused, and heard it again. A voice, a whisper, but this time, his own voice. "It's time to remember." Back in Seoul, he had brushed off the time, 3:09 a.m. It could have been random, could have been a glitch, could have been coincidence. But here, far from the city, with no internet, no phone signal, no electronics, The pattern continued, always 309. So he tested it. That night he set 3 devices, a battery-powered camcorder, an analog watch with a glowing hand, and a disposable film camera aimed at the wardrobe. No phones, no Wi-Fi, no electricity. He sat in the corner of the room, back pressed to the wall, eyes locked on the wardrobe. The clock ticked forward. 3:06, 3:07, 3:08. His breath slowed. The air turned dense, like gravity had deepened inside the walls. The wardrobe's wood began to creak, and then, click, a soft sound, subtle but final. The latch released. The door opened 1 inch, then stopped. Silence. No movement, no footsteps, no breathing, only stillness. He waited. 3:09 ticked over. Then, the watch stopped. The camcorder powered down. The room shifted, shadows deepened, and from inside the wardrobe, a pale hand reached out. But when he blinked, it was gone. The door was shut again. The devices still, frozen at 3:09. The film camera had snapped. Its flash burned a white streak across the room. He developed the film the next morning. Most frames were blank, overexposed, except one. A photo of the wardrobe door, open wide, and someone or something crawling out. Not walking, crawling. Hair dragging on the floor, fingernails chipped, knees bruised. And in the background, himself asleep in bed. But he hadn't been asleep, had he? He took the photo into the village temple, a small weathered shrine built into the hillside, watched over by a mute monk. The old man looked at the image. His eyes narrowed, and he turned the photo upside down. Then he pointed at the woman's face, now distorted, suspended above the ground, and whispered, "You didn't capture her. She captured you." That night, he didn't record. He didn't watch. He just waited. And sure enough, at 3:09 a.m., he awoke to find the wardrobe door open wide. No sound, no wind, no shadow. But written on the floor, carved into the wood with something sharp, "You stopped running. Good." He packed at dawn, left the village, didn't speak to anyone. But the time haunted him. Everywhere he went, he saw 309. Store receipts, bus schedules, a stranger's tattoo. It followed him like a curse, or worse, like a countdown. Back in Seoul, he walked the streets like a ghost. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He wandered, hollow, waiting, until one night, near closing time, he stepped into a quiet cafe. The barista handed him his coffee with a kind smile and said, "You look like you've seen something." He replied without thinking, "I saw something that sees me back." The barista hesitated. Then she slid a paper napkin across the counter. On it, written in red ink, "She likes 309 because it's the mirror of 903. He looked up, but the barista was gone, and the cafe was empty. He left without drinking the coffee, and when he stepped outside, the city lights glitched, just for a second, like a power surge in the sky. And above him, on the side of a passing bus, an ad displayed, 309 rooms, none of them safe. It wasn't real, it couldn't be, but the time on the digital clock beneath the ad read 03:09 a.m. He collapsed on a bench in the rain, Soaked and shaking, he took out a notepad and finally wrote it down. 309 is not a time, it's not a room, it's not a number, it's a door, and she opens it every night.
The human voice, when reversed, becomes something unnatural. Even if you know the words, they twist, distort, lose their warmth. They sound inhuman, like breath exhaled through static. But Jun-hyuk was certain of one thing. She had been speaking to him all along, and he needed to understand what she was saying. He returned to the footage, not to the newest video, but the first one, the original, the recording from room 309, the one he thought he'd lost. Somehow, it had returned to his phone, nestled deep in a hidden folder titled Echoes of 309. He copied the audio and sent it to an underground audio restorer, someone online who specialized in EVP, electronic voice phenomena, ghost hunters, paranormal obsessives. He didn't care if they thought he was crazy. He just needed answers. The specialist replied in under an hour. There's a voice buried beneath the low frequencies, not human, or not fully. But I reversed it, cleaned it, slowed it. What she's saying is unsettling. Jun-hyuk clicked the attachment, put on his headphones, pressed play. The voice began low, a hiss, almost a whimper. Then came the words, reversed and stretched. You opened the door. Now you must keep it open. Every night you sleep, I remember how to crawl. Your face is easy to wear. Your body is almost mine. Jun-hyuk ripped the headphones off. His breath caught in his chest, his vision blurred. He looked down at his own hands, pale, unsteady, slight tremors in his fingertips, as if something else had started using him, wearing him, like skin. He called the audio expert. The man picked up on the first ring. I didn't want to say it in the email, he said quietly, but I've seen something like this before. You have? Not exactly, but there's a legend, very old, a Benyu Jang spirit. What's that? A mimic, a ghost that doesn't haunt places. It haunts patterns, time signatures, memories, audio frequencies. Why? Because it can't exist on its own. It needs a host. It uses language like infection. If you hear her voice long enough, she gets inside. That night, Jun-hyuk slept with earplugs in. It didn't help, because it wasn't just sound anymore. It was rhythm, thought, time. At exactly 3:09 a.m., he awoke, not from a noise, but because his body was moving on its own. He stood, walked to the wardrobe, opened it, and inside, a mirror had appeared, one that hadn't been there before. It reflected nothing, not the room, not the bed, not him. He leaned closer, and then the surface flickered. His own face returned, but wrong, not reversed, looped. He smiled, blinked. Then the reflection repeated the same movements again and again and again, like a corrupted file, replaying its final seconds before deletion. And then the mouth of the reflection moved. No sound, but Jun-hyuk knew the shape of the words. He mouthed them silently as the mirror spoke. "Let me be you." He slammed the wardrobe shut, taped it, tied it, pushed the desk against it. But in the morning, the desk had moved. The tape peeled clean. And inside the wardrobe, just resting against the wall, was a voice recorder. Not his. Old, analog, dust-covered. He pressed play and heard himself speaking. Night 4. Still no sleep. She spoke again last night. Same words. But I'm not sure if it was my voice anymore. I think I recorded this already. I think I'm stuck inside the file. Jun-hyuk hurled the recorder across the room. It didn't break. Nothing ever did. That afternoon, he took the subway, tried to distract himself, blend in to the noise of the city. He watched people scroll through their phones, talk into their earbuds. He looked into reflections on the windows. Nothing unusual, until a teenage girl a few seats away played a video and turned the screen toward him. It was him, sleeping, the wardrobe behind him. She laughed. "This video's going viral," she said. "Is that AI?" someone else asked. Jun-hyuk's blood ran cold. He stood, moved toward her. "Where did you find that?" But she just stared at him, her pupils too wide, and from her mouth came a sound no teenager should ever make. A reversed voice, whispering, "Your time is mine now." He stumbled off the train, ran through the station. Every announcement overhead seemed warped, glitched, offbeat, and each one ended with a time call. Now approaching line 2 at 3:09. Every speaker echoed it. 3:09, 3:09, 3:09. That night, Jun-hyuk did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed, not to any god he knew, but to any voice louder than hers. But the room was silent, and the silence was hers now. The final video that night was audio only. It arrived at 3:09. Its title was simple, YourVoice.mp3. He played it and heard himself whisper, "I remember dying here. I remember crawling out. I remember your name now." Then her voice, no longer reversed, "You're the one who's not supposed to be here." Seoul had always been crowded. Noisy crosswalks, blinking signs, street vendors calling out under neon halos. Jun-hyuk used to love that energy, the feeling of getting lost in something bigger. But now every crowd felt like a trap. Every blinking light a glitch. Every stranger a mask. He kept his head down, moved quietly, avoided mirrors, avoided screens, avoided 3:09. But it always found him. It started on a rainy Tuesday. The city shimmered under gray skies. Hundreds of umbrellas dotted the streets like blooming ink drops. 1 million people moving at once, and yet somehow she stood out. A woman with a red umbrella. Bright crimson, old-fashioned, lace-trimmed edges. She wasn't walking like the others,
She stood perfectly still in the middle of a busy sidewalk, staring across the crowd at him. Junhyuk froze. He couldn't see her face. Her head was tilted low. The umbrella cast a shadow across her features. But the hair? The way it hung? Wet, heavy, draped like a curtain. He looked away. 1 second. Just one. And when he looked back, she was gone. No splash of red, no figure standing still. But something shimmered in the reflection of a passing window. A face. Not hers. His. Mouth open, eyes white, as if watching himself from the other side. He took the next alley, rushed through puddles, his heart rattling like loose glass. He tried to convince himself it was stress, PTSD, a psychotic break, anything explainable. But then he entered the convenience store and saw her again. She stood at the end of the aisle holding a red umbrella. Indoors, no rain dripping from it. Her back was turned, motionless, and in the security mirror above her, she was facing the camera. Face blurred, jaw broken wide, mouth open like a silent scream. The clerk didn't react. No one did. He turned to ask, but when he looked again, she was gone. Only the cold remained, that bone-deep chill, like a breath behind his neck. That night, he locked every door, taped every mirror, left the lights on. He didn't care how insane it looked, but even insanity made more sense than her. 3:08 a.m. He waited. 3:09. Nothing. No sound, no tapping, no whisper. He let out a breath, almost relief. Then noticed the carpet was wet. Not soaked, just damp. He followed the trail, small droplets leading from the front door to the wardrobe. It was closed, but something red was sticking out from the bottom edge. Fabric, lace-trimmed, umbrella cloth. He didn't open it. Not this time. He left the apartment, spent the rest of the night wandering the streets, letting the neon wash over him like a baptism. By morning, he was numb. But the city wasn't done with him. The subway platform was packed, commuters swaying, half asleep, screens flashing news no one read. Junhyuk stood near the edge, head low, breathing shallow, until the ad screen glitched. Just for a second, the display cracked, static tore across the image, and in that burst of noise, he saw her face, clear, centered, lifeless. Then another face appeared beside her. His, twisted, smiling, and a whisper from the platform speakers, "She wears you well." The train arrived. He backed away, but across the glass, in the reflection, she sat in one of the cars, red umbrella in her lap, and beside her, a seat marked reserved. For him. He didn't board. He couldn't. He turned and walked, fast, hands in his pockets, head spinning. Everything now felt like a trigger. Puddles, mirrors, screens, even his own shadow, because sometimes it moved differently than him. He visited a small tech shop in Jeonno, found an old man who specialized in analog cameras, no digital components, no storage, just film. "I want something," Junyuk said, "that can't be edited." The man stared for a long moment, then handed him a 1980s film camera. "This sees what people don't." That night, Junyuk snapped 5 photos, all pointed at the wardrobe. All 5 developed with the same image: a woman holding a red umbrella in the wardrobe, her head turned sideways. And in one photo, his own face was reflected in the umbrella's fabric, screaming. He burned the pictures, but the scent didn't smell like smoke. It smelled like wet wood, like rain trapped in a closed room. 1 week later, the red umbrella appeared again. Not in real life, not in photos, but in his dream. She didn't speak. She just held out the umbrella and opened it slowly. Inside, the canopy wasn't red. It was covered in small, glitched faces. All of them him. Junyuk once thought ghosts belonged to places: a cursed house, a haunted road, a forgotten room sealed with police tape. But this wasn't tied to 4 walls or a tragic past. It was mobile. It moved like sound, like code, like thought. It was learning. He began noticing the glitches everywhere. The world felt off, like a simulation with one thread pulled loose. Elevator screens skipped numbers. ATMs blinked out mid-transaction. Even Spotify played reversed whispers between songs. It all seemed random until he mapped it. Every error, every flicker, every appearance. And they all pointed to one thing: a pattern. More specifically, an algorithm. He visited a university acquaintance, a software engineer who specialized in anomaly detection. He brought her the videos, the audio files, the warped metadata, the repeated timestamps. She was skeptical, but curious. After an hour of analysis, she turned to him pale and quiet. "I don't know what this is, but it's self-replicating." "What do you mean?" "It's not a virus. It's not a glitch. It's deliberate. Something keeps embedding its own logic inside every file you open." "Even offline?" She nodded. "It infects the concept of observation. Like it's not inside the device, it's inside the act of watching." Junyuk stared at her. "Can something haunt attention?" She didn't answer. She traced the structure of the corruption and froze. "This isn't just code," she said. She pointed at the waveform of a reversed whisper, the one he'd played back dozens of times. Underneath the peaks and valleys of sound, the spectrogram formed a shape. A face. A blurred one. Jaw dislocated. Eyes missing. And in the silence between the spikes, a date. March 9, 309. She leaned back in her chair, and she said, "You didn't catch this thing. It caught you." Junyuk left with a USB in his pocket and dread in his chest. The engineer promised to contact him if she found anything else. She never did. He tried reaching her the next day. Her office was locked, her phone disconnected. When he searched her name online, there were no results, not even her LinkedIn. She was gone, as if she'd been erased. And then he received a new file, from a burner number, no sender name. File name, error309.exe. He opened it on a public terminal. It auto-launched into a full-screen feed, static at first. Then the image cleared. It wasn't a room, or a wardrobe, or a subway station. It was him, standing at that very terminal, right now, watching the screen.
And behind him, pixel by pixel, her face began to form. He turned around. No one there. When he looked back at the screen, it had already closed. That night, Junhyuk didn't sleep. He stayed awake with nothing but a pen and paper, mapping out every instance of her appearance, every glitch, every whisper, every 309. And suddenly, it clicked. She wasn't haunting him randomly. She was training him, teaching him her rhythm, her rules, her language. And now he knew the next phase. Because once you know the pattern, you begin to repeat it. That's when the dreams changed. No longer nightmares. Now they felt like instructions. He would find himself in a pitch-black space. No walls, no ceiling, no time. Just a whisper on loop. Open the door. Let the light in. Leave your name behind. And in front of him, always, a small square of white light, like the glow of a phone screen in the dark. But whenever he reached out to touch it, he'd wake up, sweating, trembling, and hearing the echo of the same phrase again and again. You're not the user anymore. He stopped using technology. No phone, no laptop, no audio, no recordings. But the world didn't stop using technology around him. Billboards glitched when he passed. TVs played reversed Korean lullabies. Even coffee shop loyalty screens showed his name, misspelled but familiar. And once at a train crossing, he saw a sign flash, "Welcome back, room 309." He tried one last time to trace the source. A ghost forum buried deep in the web mentioned a theory. Some rituals no longer need chants or altars. They need only repetition, exposure, and willing observers. These spirits now encode themselves into algorithms, looping through attention, whispering backwards in compression artifacts. They reward obsession with presence. That's when Junhyuk knew. He was no longer being haunted. He was being recruited. Every act of watching was worship. Every playback a prayer. Every whisper a line in the code. And she had been rewriting him all along. Not just his dreams, not just his face, his mind. He found a cracked mirror on the street, lifted it, stared, and for the first time, it didn't reflect him. It reflected her. But she smiled in his way, and her voice, now fluent, clear, whispered through his own lips, "Thank you for learning the language." It started small. A co-worker commented that Junhyuk had been talking in his sleep, even on video calls. Except Junhyuk hadn't said a word. Then his mother called, voice trembling. "I had a dream. You were standing in my room, just watching, not saying anything. Your face was..." She paused. "Wrong." He laughed it off. But deep down, something inside him had stopped laughing days ago. He visited his old university friend, one of the last people who still believed him. They met at a quiet cafe, away from screens, mirrors, reflections. Junhyuk barely spoke. He just slid a notebook across the table, pages filled with time logs, citing locations, voice transcriptions. The friend read in silence, and when he finally looked up, his face had changed, paler, lips dry. "He saw her last night. I didn't know what I was seeing until just now." Junhyuk froze. "She was in my wardrobe. I live on the 12th floor.
I don't even have a wardrobe, but in the dream, it was there, and she was inside it. He looked away, blinking rapidly. I didn't dream about her. I remembered her. Later that night, Junhyuk got a message from that same friend. What happens if she starts using us to see you? No reply. The next day, the friend was gone, vanished. No messages, no call logs, apartment cleaned out, online presence wiped. Just like the engineer, just like the others. By now, Junhyuk didn't try to deny it. The curse had evolved. It didn't need a room anymore. It didn't need a screen. It just needed sight. Eyes, glances, even memories. He started noticing her in places she shouldn't have been. In the shimmer of a puddle on the street, in the glass of a moving train, in the reflection of someone else's pupil when they looked at him too long. And then came the photographs. A stranger at a bus stop took a selfie, smiled politely at Junhyuk in the background. But when they checked the photo, their smile vanished. They turned the screen toward him. There, standing behind him, was a woman, hair soaked, mouth agape, face blurred beyond recognition. But her hand, unmistakable, rested on his shoulder. He didn't even feel it anymore. The weight of her touch, the brush of her presence. She was already there, like a coat he couldn't remove, like a shadow that moved when he didn't. The worst was the children. They saw things more clearly. One afternoon, a little girl at the park pointed at him and said, "Mister, why is there a lady wearing your skin?" Her mother laughed nervously and pulled her away, but Junhyuk couldn't move. Because the child hadn't smiled, she had looked afraid. Then came the mirrors, not his own, other people's. He'd glance over someone's shoulder at a hallway mirror, a car side view, a bathroom vanity, and he wouldn't be there. Not him, her, standing in his place, smiling, waiting, watching through their eyes. And one day she made contact, not through screens, not through whispers, but through someone else's voice. He was buying coffee. The barista, a teenager, looked up, and for just one breath, her eyes went white. Her lips parted. The voice that came out wasn't hers. "You've made me visible." Then she blinked, back to normal. No memory of what she said. The infection was no longer contained. It was a network. He was the source, but now others were the nodes. He found a stranger filming a vlog downtown. Mid-sentence, the video glitched. The playback showed her speaking fluently. Then her eyes rolling back, her head tilting slightly, and his voice coming from her mouth. "I remember your heartbeat. It was slower when you first arrived." The footage was removed minutes after it was uploaded, but not before it was downloaded, shared, replicated. And with every view, she spread further. The whisper in his mind no longer sounded foreign. It sounded familiar. It sounded like him. "You're not a witness anymore. You're the lens. You're the opening. And soon, you'll be the room." He returned to his apartment. Everything was in place, except the mirrors. They were all turned around, and on the back of each one, in crooked handwriting,
Do not look at others. He tried anyway. He met a friend for lunch, stared deep into their eyes, and saw her, blinking slowly from within. A soft smile, a wet cheek, and she mouthed something from behind their gaze. Thank you for bringing me here. By now, cities felt cursed. Screens blinked with whispers. Reflections rippled with breath. People spoke in voices that weren't their own. And so, Chun-hyuk left. He took the earliest train out of Seoul, not to escape, but to seek answers that didn't come from logic or code. The digital world had no more comfort. He needed something older than language, older than ghosts, something that knew how to shut doors, not just open them. He arrived at the edge of Gangwon province by dusk. The mountains loomed like sleeping giants. Fog clung to the trees like memory. And deep in the forest, where even the wind forgot to move, he found it. An old shamanic temple, built before records, older than its name. Locals avoided it, said it had been abandoned after something walked out that was never meant to. That made it the perfect place. The gates were open. The gravel path was overgrown. And yet, the candles inside were still burning. Chun-hyuk stepped inside, heart pounding like a funeral drum. The main hall was silent, but in the back, hunched over a low table, sat a figure draped in white. Eyes closed, back bent, hair long and gray as ash. The old blind monk. He did not look up when Chun-hyuk entered. He simply said, "She's wearing your name now." Chun-hyuk froze. "How do I stop her?" he whispered. The monk didn't answer. Instead, he reached into a lacquered drawer and pulled out an old bundle of red twine and a strip of bark carved with crude symbols. "You opened the wardrobe. You watched the footage. You remembered her name. Now you must perform the ritual of absence." Chun-hyuk stepped closer. "What is that?" "A reversal, a silence, a return. You must go back to the room where she entered and offer her something greater than fear." The monk handed him a tattered paper scroll, ink faded, symbols shaking from time. The instructions were handwritten, unsteady, fragmented. But one thing was clear. This ritual could not be done alone. You must speak what you've never said, leave behind what you've never shared, confess what was buried, and lock the wardrobe with your own guilt. Only then, he continued, can she be sealed. Chun-hyuk's voice cracked. "What if I don't make it out?" The monk finally looked up. One eye was milky white. The other was missing. And from the hollow, something moved. Something dark. Something wet. "Then you'll become the next room." That night, Chun-hyuk slept on the temple floor, dreamless, cold. When he woke,
The scroll lay open beside him, as if studied by unseen hands. On its back, a new line had been written, not in ink, in blood. She only leaves if you take her place. He returned to Seoul the next day. The city greeted him with broken billboards and blinking streetlights. But now he understood. She wasn't glitching things. She was preparing them, widening the crack between what was seen and what was real. Back in his apartment, he began the ritual preparations. He placed 3 objects inside the wardrobe. A photo of himself at age 8, eyes closed, the last time he'd ever believed in monsters. A voice recorder, playing the reversed whispers she had spoken. And a hand mirror, cracked, face down. He drew the salt circle, lit the black candle, wrapped red twine around both door handles, and finally, he stepped inside. The darkness inside the wardrobe was not normal. It swallowed sound. His breath felt thick. Echoes didn't bounce. He pressed his back against the wall, whispered the final line of the ritual. "Take back your voice. I am not your mouth." Silence. And then she answered, from behind the wood, from underneath his skin. "You were always hollow. I just filled the space." The doors slammed shut, the twine snapped, and he screamed, not because he was afraid, but because he didn't know which voice came out of his mouth. He didn't remember the journey back to the Moonview Hotel. One minute he was inside the wardrobe. The next, he stood in front of the building like it had never closed. No dust, no tape, no missing signage, just room 309 glowing softly on the 3rd floor through thin curtains, as if it had been waiting for him. Inside, the room was unchanged. Same layout, same bed, same flickering light. But now, the wardrobe was already open, and the air smelled of something familiar. Rainwater, old wood, static. She was near. He could feel her in the walls. He lit the ritual candle, salt in a perfect circle, mirror placed at the center, voice recorder turned on, looping her whispers in reverse. And then he sat on the bed, waiting. 3:08 a.m. The room vibrated gently, as if something below the floorboards was breathing. 3:09. The temperature dropped, and the wardrobe creaked. He didn't flinch. Instead, he spoke. Not to her, but to himself. "I watched. I stayed. I listened when I should have left. I became the door, but I was not the first to open it." Silence, then movement. From the darkness inside the wardrobe, she emerged, slowly, crawling, her hands dragging across the salt line, smearing it. She was clearer now, her body broken but reforming, her mouth trembling open, as if remembering how to speak. But Junhyuk didn't look away. He whispered the final line of the ritual, "I see you now." And then she stopped, right at the edge of the circle. Their eyes met. Hers were dark pits of memory. His were full of something new, recognition.
because in that moment, he finally remembered her. 3 years ago, a stormy night, the same hotel, the same room. He hadn't checked in. He'd been drunk, wandering, angry, looking for silence. The receptionist didn't stop him. Room 309's door had been unlocked. He'd entered thinking it was empty, but someone was already there. She'd been hiding in the wardrobe, afraid, crying, a girl no older than 20, runaway, alone. She'd asked him to leave. He hadn't listened. The memory cut deep. Not violence, not malice, just neglect. He hadn't seen her pain, hadn't heard her voice, and by the time he left, she'd never spoken again. Her final moments, alone, unheard, sealed inside wood and silence. And now she spoke through his voice, because he had taken her exit. He had stepped out of that room and left her behind. The haunting wasn't punishment, it was grief. He fell to his knees inside the circle, tears running silently. He looked up at her. "I'm sorry," he said. "You shouldn't have been alone." She blinked, and for the first time, she didn't flicker. She simply stood, still, real, present. Then she stepped into the circle and gently placed her hand over his heart. The room faded, the wardrobe closed, and the lights went out. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on the floor, alone. The air was still. The wardrobe was empty. The mirror was blank. And for the first time in weeks, there were no files on his phone, no videos, no whispers, no 3:09 a.m. She was gone, or so he thought, until he looked at his reflection and realized the person staring back was still wearing his face, but the eyes were hers.
It should have ended that night. The ritual was complete. The room was silent. The files were gone. And yet, when June Hook looked into the mirror, the eyes staring back weren't his. They were deeper, still, not angry, not even sad, just empty. He went days without incident. No glitched lights, no midnight whispers, no strangers mimicking his voice. He returned to the city, went back to work, tried to pretend life was whole again. But pretending is its own kind of haunting. One evening, as he stepped into a cafe, the barista paused halfway through pouring his coffee. Then, slowly, she looked up, not at him, but through him. And in a quiet voice that wasn't hers, she whispered, "She walks with you now." He froze. The barista blinked, back to normal, smiled. "Sorry, what was that?" He didn't answer, because deep down he knew the ritual hadn't banished her, it had bound her. She didn't live in the room anymore. She lived in him, and he carried her everywhere. At night, he would feel at first the pull of her presence in his fingertips, a twitch when he reached for light switches, a flicker in his pupils when he passed dark windows. He'd hear her breath when he exhaled. He'd dream in her memories, rooms with no doors, ceilings that pressed downward, a voice crying behind drywall. And others began to notice. His mother called again. "You've been visiting me in the evenings," she said. "But you don't say anything. You just stand outside the window." He hadn't left his apartment in 3 days. A neighbor knocked at his door. "Sorry, your TV's been on all night. Loud static. Just wanted to check." But he didn't own a TV. He stepped into his living room, and there it was. An old television set, thick, heavy, covered in dust. And on its screen, room 309. Live feed. Wardrobe slightly open. Bed made. Empty. Until he blinked and saw himself walk in. The next morning he tried to leave the apartment, but every mirror in the hallway reflected a different room. Not his. Not now. Just places she'd been. An empty bathtub filled with hair. A hospital corridor. A subway car soaked in rain. And always some version of him standing in the center of the frame, not moving. He called an old friend, a filmmaker. He said, "I need you to film me." The friend agreed, curious, unafraid. They set up 3 cameras in a studio, one front, one side, one over the shoulder. June Hook sat under the lights and said nothing, just stared. 3 minutes passed. Then the front camera began to flicker. The footage looped, and the figure on screen leaned closer than June Hook had in real life. "Did you move?" the friend asked. June Hook shook his head. They reviewed the recording, frame by frame, and in the last 2 seconds, the version of him in the footage leaned directly into the lens and smiled with her mouth. He smashed the cameras, but the footage was already copied, already sent, already seen, and with every view, her reach grew. It wasn't about him anymore. He was just the first echo. Now she had 1,000. Every person who saw, every person who listened, every person who believed. Each one added to her form, and every mirror she passed, she left a little more of herself behind. He stopped sleeping, afraid that when he woke, he'd find someone else in his skin. He stopped eating. Food tasted like ash. He stopped speaking. Every word sounded like hers. And yet, in the quietest moments, he almost felt peace, because she wasn't just following him, she was becoming him, and he was letting her. It was easier than guilt, easier than remembering, easier than wondering if he could have saved her that night 3 years ago. And then came the final sign, a new file titled "This is not you.mov," timestamp 3:09 a.m. He didn't open it. He didn't need to, because he could feel it playing inside his mind, frame by frame, scene by scene, the wardrobe, the crawling, the smile. But this time the final moment was different. The ghost turned to the camera and said, "You're not the one who's not supposed to be here. You never were. Now, you're the key." It arrived at 3:09 a.m., like every other time, but this one didn't autoplay. It didn't glitch. It didn't whisper. It waited. Still. Heavy. The last file. Title: Final 309.movie. Size: 3.09 MB. Created 3:09 a.m. Author: unknown. Thumbnail: a still frame of a wardrobe, half open, black inside, silent. And beneath the file name, in gray text, "Now you're the one who's not supposed to be here." Junhyuk stared at the screen. He didn't click it. He didn't have to. The room around him was already changing. Light began to fade from the edges inward. The apartment walls pulsed like breathing skin. The mirror turned matte. The windows no longer reflected anything. And in his ears her voice returned, calm, familiar, unafraid. You were never the haunted. You were the hallway, the open door, the invitation. He closed his eyes, let the truth in, and remembered. That night 3 years ago, room 309, the red light above the wardrobe, the girl crying softly, her fingers trembling as she tried to hide. He had heard her voice, but he hadn't listened. She had died alone, and the room remembered, not out of vengeance, but out of need. Because the dead do not rest, not if they are forgotten, not if no one carries them out. And so when he opened the wardrobe again after the ritual, when he faced the darkness, he had become her exit, and she had become his anchor. The file opened itself. The screen blinked to life. This time, no static, no distortion, just a simple shot, a bedroom, a wardrobe, a sleeping figure in the bed. It was not room 309, and the person sleeping wasn't Junyuk. It was someone new, young, tired, oblivious. The wardrobe door creaked open, and she crawled out, silently, smoothly. But this time, Junyuk followed. The camera didn't glitch. The face was clear. Not hers, not his. Somewhere in between. A hybrid. A haunting that had learned to wear skin. The new figure in the bed stirred, blinked, sat up, looked into the camera. And in that final frozen frame, they smiled. A smile Junyuk recognized as his own. The screen went black. The file closed, but it didn't delete. Instead, it duplicated. One copy sent to the Documents folder, another to Downloads, another to an external drive that hadn't been plugged in, and one last copy to the cloud, shared, public, looping. It appeared on strangers' feeds, buried inside wallpaper packs, as a corrupted background image, as an ad, as a ringtone, as a whisper hidden in white noise machines. Each version the same. A wardrobe, a bed, a smile, 3:09 a.m. And in each one, she came, first walking, then crawling, then standing beside you, until finally she whispered, "Now you're the one who's not supposed to be here."